The Parkinson's Podcast is brought to you by the Davis Phinney Foundation and brings you the stories, wisdom, and expertise of people living with Parkinson's, care partners, and Parkinson's professionals. This episode contains excerpts from the Q&A during our March 2025 Living with Parkinson's Meetup. In this Q&A, the panelists answer questions from the audience about accepting their diagnosis, surprising aspects of living with Parkinson's, posture, exercise, dental care, and young-onset Parkinson's.
How did you come to accept your diagnosis? We've talked about this a little bit, but I want to just dive into it a little bit. How did you accept your diagnosis? And the person was really interested in how long did it take? They were rather newly diagnosed, and they feel like it's been so long, and they just keep doubting it. That's the gist of their message was they can't accept it, and they don't know how to get to that point. So I'm wondering if we have any perspectives on that.
I think it's the date of acceptance is different in anybody's timeline, but I think everybody has to get to that date of acceptance, the day after the diagnosis. In my case, it was 2 years after my diagnosis. But I think that acceptance is the life-changing event besides being diagnosed. So for me, I would always encourage people to get to that date of acceptance as quickly as possible. But I think it's really individualized.
I think for me, it's not a linear process. It's not like I just arrived at the date of acceptance and I was like, no longer, or I didn't accept it. Boy, that would be easy, or for me. But I think it's still happening because it's changing. I have to accept certain things, like I'm losing my certification as a nurse anesthetist. It is bugging the heck out of me. I know that I'm not going to practice in that field, but I thought I was doing great. And then when I found out that was going to happen, it just really hurt my heart. It doesn't mean that I haven't accepted that, but my Parkinson's, but it's that one thing that I'm having trouble accepting, or maybe I'm having trouble accepting I can't button my buttons today. I do think there's a general level of acceptance, that a piece that's come over me, and it took me a couple of years, I'll be honest, to get there. However, it's still sort of up and down at times. And, I don't know what the future holds in terms of acceptance, but it is hard to accept certain things, certain symptoms, certain developments. That's what it's like for me.
I'm not sure if this is a symptom of acceptance or a path to acceptance, but being open about having Parkinson's. When I first was diagnosed, I used to say, I don't mind that I have Parkinson's. I just don't want to look like I have Parkinson's. And I kind of hid my Parkinson's from anybody that I could. And I think that I've reached a place now where I'm much more open about, just from the beginning, saying, hey, by the way, I have Parkinson's. You notice I'm moving slowly and stiffly. I have Parkinson's. And just getting it out there and being comfortable with that. And again, I don't know if that's a sign of coming to acceptance or part of my path to acceptance, but I think that's has been important for me.
I just add that faith helped me a lot when I finally took that step and knew it was time to start meds. By that time, I was really bad. And it was an acceptance that my retirement, my future, and my wife we had to deal with this. And so we turned a lot to faith, and I'll just share a little funny thing about that, because my wife said, well, I'd like to get a tattoo sort of in honor of you on this. And I said, no, I don't want a tattoo. I don't want you to get a tattoo. And we finally settled on a tattoo that we both have. And it just says, it is well with my soul, because that really sums it up. And every time I have a difficult time, it's high on my leg so you can't see it. I pat it and remember, I'm having a tough time, but it's well with my soul. So those who may have faith and have come from a faith community, I think that's been helpful. Those who maybe don't belong to a faith community, I think they can still find that way of finding the peace.
There was a study that came out a couple years ago that found that people with neurological conditions who had closer proximity to green and blue spaces, namely outdoor parks, had better long-term outcomes in terms of their overall health and well-being, which I guess is really what wealth is, I guess it would be a way to say it. But in any case, that's interesting because that is a way that people connect with a sort of bigger purpose, in addition, if they don't have a relationship with the faith community. Before we move on to another question, I just want to give Stan an opportunity to offer some thoughts about this if you have any.
Well, I think like the discussion is suggested that acceptance is a lot of different things. For the sort of the nuts and bolts of acceptance, I pretty much accepted it right away when, even before I saw my movement disorder specialist, I knew that's what I had. I'm a retired family physician, so I had some experience in it. And so I just started, I've got the disease. But then I think, like everyone has said, there's different stages of acceptance and how you go through that process going forward. And I think it's important to pay attention to because, like Larry suggested, if you can get to the point of a total acceptance, some ways that can be transformative and you can move on and sort of start a new chapter in your life.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Well, I think we covered that question. So let's move on to another one. This is maybe a little related, but I think it would be interesting to hear everybody's answer. Someone wrote in and asked, what surprised you most about the reality of a diagnosis with Parkinson's? Was it physical, emotional, how others react to you? What was the most surprising thing? I'll go first with this real quick, and I'll just say what surprised me was that the physicians were confident. When I finally got to see somebody, they were pretty confident that it was Parkinson's, and I was 37, and I thought, wait a minute, I've read enough to know that there are other things that this could be, and why do you not think it's these other things? But they all had answers for that. And it took a while to get one that I really understood because it's complicated to understand those points. But that's what was surprising to me, that how confident they could be given how strange this experience was for me.
For me, and I learned something new today about this, that Parkinson's affects the muscles. And that's not just you're shaking hands or you're slow walking. I learned today a friend mentioned that he was having trouble coughing because his coughing muscles were affected by the Parkinson's. And I was like, oh, I never would have thought of that. And you can see I'm coughing this afternoon. I'm getting over some bronchitis. But I was like, oh, yeah, maybe that's why I'm having trouble coughing.
That's funny. I was at the dermatologist today and she did not know I had Parkinson's until I told her, but she observed before then that I had a little bit of asymmetry in my eyebrows. And I told her that actually I told her later that that's actually probably related to Parkinson's because I told her that this was an early observation she made. And I said, that's probably because my facial expression is skewed by the fact that my musculature is more affected on one side than the other based on the state of my Parkinson's. I don't know that that's actually true, but I was just guessing that that's why she observed that.
Quick question for Stan, if you don't mind. Stan, you and I both went to med school. Did you know what was wrong very early on?
With my diagnosis?
Yes.
Yeah, I suspect I had a strong suspicion when I first noticed I had a tremor in my hand that's what it was. But I think it was interesting what Robert said, that it's such a complex disease and it has so many symptoms and it affects your whole body and all your functioning. And,
Yes.
It was interesting. I didn't know anything about that when I was in medical school or practicing medicine. But once I got the disease, I was able to educate myself and read and learn about it. But I mean, it's so far reaching and there's so much involved with the disease that's what was surprising to me that, I'm still learning about things like Robert says, cough or whatever that, oh yeah, that's the Parkinson's,
Yeah.
It
Right.
can increase your chance of getting melanoma. It can, it's just the list is endless.
That's why I was at the dermatologist, just to be careful.
Right.
Karen, I see you came off mute. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think what's been most surprising for me is not so much symptomatology, that I would be deeply happy and fulfilled in the life that I have now, because it was just not what I imagined. And if you had told me at that time, you're going to be just really connected to people and, socially fulfilled, and just your life is going to have a lot of meaning and you're going to do things that matter to you and other people. Like I've been like, I can't curse here, so I'm not going to, but there's an expletive in my brain, I would have been like, no way, you're wrong. No, but that was a pleasant surprise, and it remains so. And so when I get discouraged, I think, yeah, but there have been positive things. So
You're making me tear up. It's such a lovely message, Karen. And I think I don't think you're the only person that has that experience either. So that's it. I think this is really good to call out. Thanks for sharing that.
I don't think I had any surprises. The only one that really surprised me was I lost friends. Actually had a friend who routinely went out to dinner, and he said one day, he said, "Hey, I'm just, if you don't mind, really don't think we should do that." He said, "Your cane is a downer." And I thought, okay, this is your thought and your opinion, but if you think my cane is a downer for you, it's a real downer for me.
Imagine how I'd feel if I didn't have it and I happened to not be able to move or I fell. Then it would be a real downer for me. So I'd rather just use my cane.
But that was probably my biggest surprise, I'd say, was that there were people who either were embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. I mean, I go out in public and I certainly have movement disorders. It's obvious, but I'm not embarrassed by it. But other people are embarrassed sometimes to be with us. I don't always get that, but and one last thing. You said, when did you go up to acceptance? Okay, I've had Parkinson's 24 years. When I wake up in the morning, I often feel, before I ever move, I'm laying there in bed, I feel wonderful. I feel like there's nothing wrong. And before I get up, I think, oh my God, something happened over the night and I'm healed. and I've done that almost every day for 24 years. And knowing better, but the moment I swing my feet over and try to stand up, I realize I'm not healed. So, do you ever fully? I don't know. I accept it, but I guess there's that little shred of weird hope that goes on.
So we got a question in the chat that I think we should get to if we can. So let's go to the question about stooped posture. I think it's pretty common in Parkinson's for there to be a stooped posture. I think many of us experience that. And the question was, what have you ever found a way to help yourself sort of navigate that? I have a thought, and it actually it relates to a comment I just put in the chat myself, which is that there is some research that showed that sport climbing, which is just indoor rock climbing, had a positive impact on posture for people with Parkinson's. And I would think that relates to just the big extended reaches you have to make that sort of force your shoulders back and down potentially. I mean, I don't know exactly the mechanism, but there was research that showed that, and I believe it's linked on our blog post that we have that covers sport climbing. And I don't know, anybody have any other tips for addressing posture?
Well, I think physical therapy and exercise is obviously the most important thing, to stay as active as you can and work on those muscles and flexibility. Exercise
and it will help slow the progression. It's not going to stop that necessarily, that stooping over. I'm actually off 13 inches. So if you they measure this distance by putting you against a flat wall and then measuring the distance from your back of your head to the wall. And so I'm stooped at 13 inches right now. And but yet, the solution to keep from going to 15 inches is to try to keep exercising and exercising and exercising to hold that off as long as I possibly can.
I try to strengthen my core body muscles in my stomach and try to strengthen those back muscles, just some weights going like this and stretching. I do find myself coming forward and I just constantly remind myself, I roll my shoulders back and I imagine my head attached to a rope, but it is hard.
Yeah, I've got an excuse when I'm riding my bike with that stooped handlebars. I can spend hours on it and feel great on it, but afterwards I do very conscious of the fact you've got to roll your shoulders do stretching and compensate for all those hours of that stooped posture. Doesn't help when you're on the bike for 5 hours.
I just wanted to say that if your insurance will cover it, physical therapy with a knowledgeable physical therapist can do a lot.
Yes.
And then keep up doing those exercises after you've finished your physical therapy program. And if you can't do physical therapy with a therapist, there's a ton of videos on YouTube. Google stooped posture, find somebody that you find knowledgeable, and there's lots of exercises online that you can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of useful resources online. I guess I just want to add a little, not a caveat, but an extra thought there, which is that if you don't find that you're having positive results from something you choose to try, that may be a cue that you might want to spend the money if you can. I realize this is hard and it's not an easy answer, but if you have to pay out of pocket to go see somebody to get them to give you some advice, if you don't find success when you try to address something on your own, that's maybe worth your while, because you may be trying to work on the wrong muscles, and a really trained specialist can help with that. And I do just want to plug also that, we are not offering you your medical advice directly here. So you should definitely consult with your own care team before you go rock climbing or before you start doing any new exercise, for sure, because there may be a reason that we can't possibly know. That means you shouldn't do something in particular. But yes, I do think there's a lot of resources online. And if you get a clearance from your doctor to do that, then by all means go dive in and find what works for you. But don't stick to one thing. If it doesn't work, try something new, because as Robert said, there's so many resources. If we can sneak in one more question, I'd love to do it. And I think we can maybe get it in there. And maybe we can all just offer the answer for ourselves. The question was, what are the three, this came in before the meetup as well, by the way, what are the three most productive exercises for Parkinson's? And I think there's no real clear answer for that. That's sort of uniform, but I think each person might have their own answer. I think if we had a physical therapist, in fact, when we had our webinar with Mike Brach the other day, his answer was, basically a lot of people would say, the best exercises are the ones you're going to do regularly that are attainable for you. So I don't know, does anybody have are you willing, panelists, to answer the question for yourself? What three exercises are the most helpful to you? Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
I'm not sure I have three, but I wanted to mention, I'm a big fan of the LSVT big therapy, which is actually, there's like 7 exercises that I can do in 30 minutes in the morning. And when I went through my LSVT training with a physical therapist, I was working with a lady who had been doing that for many, many years. And one of her comments to me was that her clients who continued to do their LSVT exercises at home did not progress in the way that other people did. Their progression was much slower. You can look it up online, LSVT. You want to find a physical therapist who is trained in that to teach you how to do it, but then continue to do it at home afterwards. That's my favorite.
I would say rock steady boxing, cycling, and stretching for me, for sure.
Yeah, I've been a proponent for years about exercise. I think the benefits of exercise in my case is overwhelming, in the sense that it has slowed the progression of my symptoms. But equally, so I do a lot of riding of the bike, running. I still run and do a bit of swimming. But equally important is also the quiet times. The 15 minutes of meditation in the morning, mindfulness where you can focus on my breath, being in the moment helps with the anxiety. So for me, it's a combination of that high intensity cardio, but also those quiet times where you can, calm and be mindful as well with meditation.
So for me, I think it's important to have a variety of things. So I think in terms of 4 main areas of exercise that are important: strength training, aerobic exercise, balance training, and stretching. So someone said the best exercise is the exercise you're going to do, but I think if you can do a variety of things, you're going to be best off in the long run, just to keep working it from a variety of angles. I think something like rock steady boxing, a good program like that, will emphasize all 4 of those things.
So I guess my answer would probably be, I try to get my heart rate up as high as I can within reason. I mean, I try to get to 85% heart rate max, but the easiest way for me to do that is to run. I can still do that if my doses are timed well. That's getting harder. So when I can't run, I hit the bike. Swimming is good for me, although I'm terrible at it. I feel like I'm drowning all the time, and my partner's there with me, so I don't drown. That's great. I can stand up, so I'm not at any risk. Don't worry, or worry if you'd like, but you don't have to. And I also find that yoga is very helpful to me. And I want to call out that one of our audience members, noted that yoga therapy is particularly helpful, and there is a special you can go practice yoga, or you can have a yoga therapy training. There are specialists who specialize in yoga therapy, which is a little nuance to just a regular yoga practice. The key is, I think, what Stan said: do a variety of things and find a good balance. And I think that's a good way forward. I just want to draw two quick things, and then we'll wrap up. We received a question about levodopa intersecting with dental pain. And I don't think we're equipped to answer that question, but there was a person who asked if anybody's had any experience with levodopa being intolerable due to dental pain. And I don't think that's within our wheelhouse here, but I do know that dental health care is critical for people with Parkinson's. And so, in part because of the swallowing issues that people can experience. So it's important to see a dentist. So I think if you're having trouble with your medications because of your dental pain that may be exacerbated by the medication, I think it's probably pretty important to see a dentist to talk about that. And note also that some medications are contraindicated with some anesthetics that are used in dental work. So be careful about that, especially those are the MAOB inhibitors that can be a little problematic. So make sure you mention that if you're taking those when you see your dentist. And then the last question I want to just draw attention to is that there's a comment that we received last month, actually, which was, is there a cohort of young onset folks that can connect that someone can connect with in the Davis-Phinney community? And I think by and large, most of the people on this panel were diagnosed at a time where they would be young onset by definition, so to speak. But there are other young onset Parkinson's ambassadors in our ambassador list. If you'd like to reach out to some of them, you can find them on our website.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Parkinson's Podcast. For more information about the Davis-Phinney Foundation and to learn about educational offerings and community events for people affected by Parkinson's, please visit davisfinneyfoundation.org or dpf.org. This content includes information, insights, and opinions from our Parkinson's community. The views expressed are those of individual participants and do not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to substitute for the guidance, advice, or recommendations of your personal healthcare providers.